El Norte. Miguel is unhappy because he feels that he does all the work in his house. He and his parents are immigrants from Mexico, and his parents do not speak English. He does all the translating for them in many of the mundane tasks. His father often gets upset with him when things go wrong. Miguel thinks that most of the time things go wrong because his parents don't listen to him or make decisions based on incomplete or false information. It sounded so easy when Miguel's father had explained that they were going to the United States. There was just no hope in Las Marias, Miguel's small village in Michoacán, Mexico. They were in the poorest of the poor, but hot and cold running water was just a dream. They ate, but not well and not often. Hope was in El Norte. Miguel's father would get a job. Miguel, his sister, and brother would go to school, and his mom would stay at home and take care of the baby. When they had saved enough money, they'd come back to Mexico, build a fine house, and live like human beings. The boys, educated in the United States, would get good jobs, and the family will join the Mexican middle class. In Michoacán, it sounded so easy. But crossing the border was dangerous and expensive. Many young people from Las Marias had died from heat or thirst crossing the desert, or in a car trying to avoid the migra. Nevertheless, Miguel's father was determined. Finding a coyote to take them wasn't especially difficult, but paying him was. The fee for Miguel and his family was $5,000. His uncle had been sending money home from the U.S. and they had $3,500. Miguel's dad eventually got the coyote down to $4,500, but it meant they had to wait another 6 months until the middle of the hot California summer. The crossing was difficult. They were stuffed into the trunk of a creaky old sedan without food or water for hours on end. The coyote took them to Tijuana, where 3 weeks after leaving Las Marias, the family crossed into San Diego. Life in the States was terrifying from the beginning and had remained that way. Miguel's uncle was supposed to meet them in San Diego, but didn't show up for 2 days. In the meantime, they had no place to sleep and nothing to eat except the trash from restaurants in the area. If they were caught, it was back to Mexico. Miguel's uncle finally showed up, but he was going back to the village. He had lost his job and was tired of running. He knew a man in Salinas, nearly 400 miles away, who could give them jobs in the fields. 10 years and amnesty later, they were legal U.S. residents, but those 10 years had been horrible. They were poor in Las Marias, but not like they were poor here. The problem was that they saw so much they couldn't have: televisions, cars, fancy clothes, fancy food, fancy. Miguel knew he didn't have to have fancy, but more than jeans and t-shirts to wear to school would be nice once in a while. It also didn't help that his friends laughed at him for his daily beans and tortillas, even though many of them often ate the same things, just not every day. But sometimes it was more serious. Medicine for Pablo when he had mononucleosis. His father could not go home to his brother's funeral in Las Marias. Miguel couldn't go on field trips with his class. How much easier his schoolwork would be with a computer. Gas and car insurance were expensive, but they couldn't keep their jobs without a car. Before amnesty, they couldn't get a driver's license or insurance, so they lived in constant fear of tickets or accidents, which would have meant instant deportation. They lived on the edge and they never spent any money for extras. Miguel wondered what it would be like to go into Baskin-Robbins and order the biggest sundae they had, or even the smallest. His mom and dad learned only a bit of English, so he was their guide, and when things went wrong, he got the blame. When he was only 13, he was the one who had to explain the contract that his parents signed to lease a car. Of course, the dealer didn't explain that his parents would have to pay more if they drove beyond a certain number of miles, so Miguel didn't explain that to his parents. His dad was furious. He ranted, raved, and called Miguel estúpido, and plenty of other words. Miguel wanted to say that his dad was estúpido because he hadn't learned English, but he thought that might not be such a good idea. Their goal was to return to Mexico, but every year they stayed in the U.S. That goal seemed farther and farther away. His father realized that if he wanted all his children to be educated, they couldn't return until Rosalba, now 8 years old, graduated high school. He also spoke of Las Marias as if it were heaven. He listened only to Spanish radio, watched Spanish TV, spoke in Spanish, yelled at Miguel, Pablo, and Rosalba in Spanish, drank in Spanish, and dreamed in Spanish. Pictures of the village and friends and relatives hung from the walls of their tiny apartment. Miguel wondered why he came north if everything in Michoacan was so wonderful, but he didn't ask that question. One of Miguel's father's greatest complaints was how expensive everything was in El Norte. They were living in Salinas, and their one-bedroom apartment was costing them $1,000 each month. They had heard how much more money people made in the States compared to Mexico, but they hadn't heard how much it cost to live in the States. They were doing all right. His father had a job as a custodian for a real estate office. Miguel helped clean the place in the morning and then went to his dishwashing job after school. Pablo took whatever odd jobs he could find. Everybody, including Miguel's mother, picked lettuce when the crop was in and they weren't working at other jobs. So they were making some progress. His mother and father had two rules. 10% of everything they made went back to Las Marias, and 10% went in the coffee can in the kitchen. The coffee can was his father's obsession. "When this coffee can is full of $1,000 bills, we can go home," he would say. It drove Miguel nuts. The coffee can had money in it, but they were never going to fill it with $1,000 bills, especially if they left it in the stupid can. Miguel tried to explain to his father about the interest they could earn if they put the money into some kind of account, but his father would not discuss it. "These people up here, they steal from you," he would say. "I don't trust any of them. Why would I give them my money and let them take it away from us? No banks. We earn our money, we keep our money, we use our money. You go learn from your books so we can leave this place and let me make the money decisions." So the money sat in the can, making his dad feel good and Miguel feel bad. He wasn't all sure that he wanted to go to Mexico anyway. He was thinking of a different plan, where he and Pablo would stay in the States, go to college here, and his mother and father and Rosalba could return home. He hadn't mentioned it to his father yet, but Pablo thought it was a great idea. Sending money to Mexico was also difficult. Even the little amount they sent could make a tremendous difference to their relatives. The problem was getting it there. When they began, the best Miguel could do was to send it through Western Union, which charged 10%. Then his abuelo and abuela had to pay to receive it. Later on, he discovered cheaper ways to do it, but his dad was mad they had wasted all their money for so long. The cheapest way to send money was through the internet, but he didn't have access to the internet except for school projects, and he knew his relatives wouldn't have access either. It seemed like the land of opportunity was the land of opportunity for people with computers. Of course, Miguel knew a computer wouldn't help because it's hard to send a coffee can through a computer. The other problem was that it seemed like people up here were just out to cheat people. He had to argue with his dad for days about the lawyer who said he could get citizenship for the entire family for only $8,000. He knew it couldn't be true, but his dad wouldn't listen. The deal was that they would pay $1,000 every 6 months until the entire fee was paid. His dad made him pay the guy who disappeared after 3 payments. His father was so upset and so ashamed that Miguel didn't say anything. He wanted to, but he just had to hold his tongue. Last year, his mother got sick. At first, it was just a cough, and then things went from bad to worse. They went to a bruja, who explained that this was a bad sickness, not one of the good ones that a bruja could fix. His mom resisted going to a medico because she knew it would be expensive and she didn't really trust doctors. She was sure, with her language problems, that she wouldn't be able to explain how she was feeling and she would just feel worse. Besides, it was just a cough and a little overwork. She would be fine. Well, she wasn't fine, and she continued to get worse. When they finally took her to the doctor, she explained that she would need to take some tests. The results were bad. Miguel's mother had breast cancer, and it was very advanced. 3 months later, the family buried his mother. It had all happened so quickly that Miguel didn't know how to feel. She had been everything to him, the one who made meals from nothing, who made clothes from nothing, jokes and songs from nothing, and now she was nothing. How would they survive? School had been a problem for Miguel. He went in without any English at all, and because his family moved around so much, he had to start over frequently and didn't learn to read until 5th grade. But after that, things fell into place. But many of his teachers who were gringos just assumed that he was stupid because he spoke with an accent. Miguel decided he was going to lose his accent, and he did. Now he spoke English like a native, and phrases like, "Dude, no way," and "I'm so not into that," roll off his tongue like butter. For some reason, though, some of his teachers still thought he was not too bright. His friends thought it had to do with his dark skin. Many of the people from Las Marias had typical mestizo characteristics, which made him look very foreign to many Americans. Even though he earned A's in school, some people just couldn't get beyond the fact that he was Mexican. His counselors tried to steer him away from college prep classes because those aren't really what you want. He had learned the value of an education as he tried to act like an adult in a foreign country. Those classes really were what he wanted. It was one of the few times that he saw his dad take charge. The next morning, his dad drove him to school. As far as Miguel knew, it was the first time his father had been to a school in the U.S. Miguel was a little embarrassed as his father marched through the schoolyard in his shabby clothes, big straw sombrero, and sandals. Miguel thought he looked like a dumb Mexican. It was hard enough trying to fit in without having his father remind everyone of their background. They walked into the principal's office without waiting for permission and sat down in front of the principal's desk. The assistant explained that the principal was in a meeting and that she didn't know when he would be back. His father had Miguel explain that it was fine. They were in no hurry. They would just wait. The assistant looked pretty unhappy with that but didn't know how to handle it, so she just left them there. When the principal finally arrived, he was looking a little unhappy also. He explained that he had another meeting in just a few minutes and couldn't stay long. He shuffled his papers, read notes, and listened to his messages as Miguel's father politely waited. Finally, the principal was ready. It was a less than cordial conversation with Miguel acting as the unhappy translator. The question was why Miguel was not being put in college prep classes. The principal maintained that Miguel simply was not college material. Miguel's dad asked to see his grades. As they waited for the assistant to fetch the grades, the principal continued shuffling papers and Miguel's father sat in silence. When the records came in, the principal glanced at them quickly and then began to read more carefully. He looked surprised, and then his very pale face began to turn red. "Why, they're all A's and B's," he said, looking confused. "So why?" Miguel said, speaking his father's words in English. "I wonder, do your counselors think that my son is not good enough to go to your colleges?" "Well, I don't know. It is obvious that Miguel is doing fine work." "Well, maybe I know. Maybe it's that no Mexican kid, especially a very dark Mexican kid, could be smart enough. Do you think that might be it?" It wasn't a real question because his dad was just making a point, and everybody knew that. It was agreed that Miguel would be enrolled immediately in college prep classes and that he would take AP Calculus because he had received all A's in his math classes so far. As they walked out to the principal's office, his father put his arm around Miguel's shoulders. They had won this battle as a team. Maybe things would work out after all.